consideration and ventilation.
Okay. The other matter, how drunk were you at that Christmas party?
Look, David, the matters of that night have been, they've been well ventilated now for 2 years. There was a court matter in this, and at this stage, there's nothing more I can really add to the public record from what's already been said and what's actually been before the courts.
Well, Tammy Franks had a lot more to say. I mean, she accused you of being racist. David, she accused you of a whole lot of stuff.
Other people can, can make commentary as they like. I've said what I've said on this matter. I think people actually want us to talk about real issues that are right before us today, not events that were ventilated some 20 months ago. We've got a huge ICAC bill. We've got a lot happening. We've got a few weeks for Parliament to go. I think this is what Parliament should be focusing on, is what is before us.
But you know what you're going to face in 6 months' time. That the flyers are going to be out there telling the people of Wade, Sam Duluk is a drunken pest. And there'll be quotes from the magistrate who dealt with your matter. Now, he found that you didn't have a case to answer, but he also found that you're a drunken pest.
And David, that's terribly embarrassing for me, and I live with that every day, actually. And what I've tried to do every day since is to one, be a better person, and to focus on servicing and serving my electorate to the best of my ability, and focusing on issues as we have in the last 2 years, such as saving the Wade Gatehouse, talking about the need to ensure that there's a better heavy freight bypass through Adelaide, so we don't see Cross Road becoming the new Portrush Road, and talking about consumer protection and getting legislation through the Parliament. Is actually very rare that private members' legislation gets through the Parliament. I've been fortunate this year to have two go through, and my job is to work hard for the Parliament, to work hard for the people of South Australia, and most importantly, to work hard for my electorate, and ultimately my community will judge me on that. There's no doubt there'll be plenty of the other matter being ventilated in the lead up to the election, but the voters of Wade will pass judgment on that and everything else, and they know in me. They've got someone as a local member who's hardworking, who's dedicated to them, and is as diligent as they can possibly be.
Have you touched any drink since that Christmas party?
Oh, look, David, I've had the occasional red wine at home with friends, but I've sworn that I will never ever, in my public role, touch alcohol ever again, and I haven't. Can
you remember much of that night?
Look, David, as I said, this matter's been ventilated well before.
Yeah, but yes, it has. It has been ventilated in the courts about a specific allegation, and that is whether or not you assaulted Connie Benares. But Sam Duluk, it goes without saying that Sam Duluk, how can you defend your actions on that night if you can't remember them?
David, I think the magistrate sort of found 20 findings of fact. If your listeners want to look at those, they can look at the court record and that the matter is there. I think there's, like I said, David, their matters are there. They're on the public record, and that's where it ends for me in terms of that matter. For me right now, what the taxpayers of South Australia want me to focus on is serving them, and that's what they want the Parliament to do. And I think you've just had a lot of listeners on your show give feedback on the ICAC legislation, and I think that's something that the Parliament should be really focusing on at the moment. We're heading into bushfire season coming up, and that's another really big issue. And I think we've got a lot of issues bubbling away within the CFS, and the way that the volunteers are being looked after, and they're issues that the Parliament needs to be focusing on as an area which is bushfire prone and is all volunteer. Our fire brigade is CFS volunteer. The fact that it seems to be coming out of government that volunteers can't speak up about some issues they're finding in the CFS is of great concern, and I think should also be subject to question time and even a potential review as we head into the 2021-2022 bushfire season.
You have apologised publicly to Connie Benares, but have you apologised personally to her?
David, as I said, everything which on this matter is well on the public record.
It's a straightforward question, Sam Duluk. Sam Duluk, have you gone to her and said, Connie, I'm really sorry?
David, as I said, these have been well ventilated for many a time. The conversations between private people, conversations between private people, but they've all been well ventilated. They've been your show, your Spin Cycle's spoken about it for most Fridays for 20 months. You know, the papers in Adelaide have. I think people want us to focus actually what's ahead of us.
But I have not asked you these questions, and I want to give you an opportunity to speak directly to the people who are going to make a decision come next March. And Sam, look, we haven't asked you directly because there was a matter before the courts. Yes. That's resolved. Yes. So now I'm asking you again. Have you apologised directly to Connie Bananas?
David, I have. But those, as I said, those matters have all been before the court. They've all been well ventilated, and ultimately, if people in my electorate want to know more about it, and they've got personal questions that they have, they can actually come and see me. Everyone knows that I have a very open door policy in my office. If this is a matter of great concern for my electorate, as opposed to people who love talking about politics and the machinations that go behind it, they're always very welcome to come to my office and have a cup of tea.
Okay. If you are re-elected as an independent in March, is it a given that you will support a Marshall Liberal government?
David, that is the best hypothetical question of all time, and any sensible politician will say we'll make those decisions at the time as they come forward, and see how the election plays out. Most importantly, it's about listening to the electorate and serving their needs and getting good government and good governance in South Australia.
So the answer is
that is what I'm focused.
So the answer is it's not a given that you'll support a Marshall Liberal government.
Dave, the answer is that I need to be elected first. So that is.
Yeah, but if you're elected, people need to know what you're going to do. Sam Duluk, if you are elected, and it's perfectly fine for you to say, I'll judge it on its merits, which is another way of saying he can't take my vote for granted.
I think it's important that no vote is ever taken for granted. But people know what my philosophical values are. You know, people know my views on the role of government, on the need for government to be sensible debt managers, for us to look after small business, for us to have freedom of the individual and their rights. You know, those classical liberal values are my classical liberal values, and as the representative for Wade, people will always have that in me as someone who represents classical liberal values.
And do you think that the Marshall Liberal government has reflected those classical liberal values?
I think at the moment there is a conversation that needs to be had, for example, around debt. Our state debt is peaking at $33 billion over the forward estimates. I think when the current government came to government, state debt was sitting at about $10 billion. At some point, the cost of money won't be as affordable as it is at the moment, and we will start seeing interest on that debt becoming sort of you know, if it was a department of government sort of sitting at the third largest outlay of expenditure. So health is about $6 billion, education was $4 billion, and you know, when in a few years' time, you know, net interest repayments will be sitting over $1 billion. And as always, we've got to say, what is the cost of that? And then what is the role of the debt, for example? And the other big one is around GST and the GST carve-up. And I think South Australia right now is not getting a fair deal out of the Commonwealth.
Sam Duluk, we must go because we are upon the 10 o'clock news. After 10 o'clock, our book of the week is The Drone War.